Samuel Hart, a 79-year-old African-American veteran, walked through the familiar streets of his quiet neighborhood. Each step was deliberate. The weight of his years felt in every careful movement. His back had a slight hunch, and his right leg dragged just a little, a lingering injury from his time in the Korean War. Despite this, his posture still held an undeniable strength, a silent but visible sense of pride marking him as someone who had seen more than most. His worn military jacket, meticulously cared for, bore faded patches and insignia that spoke volumes. Each stitch, each patch symbolized decades of service, sacrifice, and duty. To Samuel, the jacket was more than clothing. It was a testament to who he was and what he had endured. It carried the memories of a life lived in service to a country that had often not returned the favor. The morning sun hung low in the sky as Samuel made his way toward the corner store. Just as he did every day, the sight of the familiar brick building with its slightly peeling paint brought a sense of comfort. The cheerful jingle of the bell as he entered was a small but cherished part of his routine. Inside, the young store clerk, Tom, greeted him warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Hart," Tom called with a smile. Samuel tipped his head in acknowledgement, his own quiet smile forming. He didn't need much, just his usual cup of coffee and a small pastry. He liked the simplicity of it, the quiet moments where the world slowed down, if only briefly. Stepping outside, the crisp morning air greeted him. Samuel took a deep breath, savoring the familiar scents of the neighborhood. The streets were calm, punctuated only by the occasional chirping of birds or the distant hum of a car engine. This part of the city was peaceful, a place where everyone knew everyone, and they all knew Samuel. He had lived there for decades, a fixture in the community. Most didn't know the full details of his past, but they respected him. He was the old man with the dignified air, the veteran who always greeted people kindly. As Samuel walked, coffee in hand, an unshakable feeling crept into his mind. Something about the day felt off, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Perhaps it was the sharpness of the morning light or the faint chill in the air. Whatever it was, it gnawed at him like a distant memory trying to resurface. His instincts, honed from years of service, told him to stay alert. Samuel's life had been marked by moments like this, times when unease signaled something he couldn't yet see. He had faced combat in the bitter cold of Korea, where survival had been a daily battle. But returning home had presented its own struggles, the fight against racial injustice and inequality. As a black man, Samuel had faced prejudice both in the military and in civilian life. Even now, at nearly 80 years old, those memories lingered, a reminder of battles fought on two fronts. Turning a corner, Samuel's eyes landed on a police patrol car parked idly near the curb. The sight of it sent a ripple of unease through him. It wasn't unusual to see police cars in the neighborhood, but something about this one felt different. The tension he'd felt earlier seemed to intensify. Years of experience told him not to ignore the feeling, but he also knew better than to let it dictate his actions. After all, he had faced far worse. Adjusting his grip on his cane, Samuel kept walking, his thoughts drifting to the past. He remembered moments when he'd been treated with disdain simply because of the color of his skin. Though the times had changed, some things remained stubbornly the same. Samuel had learned to carry himself with dignity, no matter the situation. It was how he survived. As he neared the crosswalk, the patrol car's engine revved slightly, and a figure inside shifted. Samuel didn't look back. There was no need. He had done nothing wrong, but he knew better than to feel completely at ease. The unease was now a tangible weight pressing against him, a quiet reminder of the world's harsh realities. Officer Kyle Baxter, sitting inside the patrol car, had a reputation, and not a good one. Barely in his late 20s, Baxter was already known for his brash behavior and quick temper, particularly toward minorities. His family's deep ties to law enforcement had instilled in him a sense of untouchable authority. To Baxter, the badge was less a symbol of duty and more a shield for his arrogance. Spotting Samuel in his military jacket, Baxter's mind went straight to assumptions. He didn't see a veteran or a man of honor. To Baxter, Samuel was just another old black man who didn't belong. Without a second thought, he leaned over to the loudspeaker. "Where do you think you're going, old man?" Baxter's voice crackled, dripping with condescension. Samuel paused, startled by the sudden interruption. The words stung, not because they were unexpected, but because they were all too familiar. He had heard variations of that tone countless times in his life. The insult was an old one, but it still cut deep. Baxter, unsatisfied with Samuel's lack of reaction, stepped out of the car. His imposing figure and swagger were meant to intimidate. He approached Samuel with deliberate slowness, his shadow falling over the older man. "You hear me, old man?" Baxter's tone was sharper now. "What are you doing walking around here like you own the place?" Samuel's grip on his cane tightened. His back straightened slightly. He met Baxter's gaze, his expression calm but firm. "I'm just heading home. Is there a problem, officer?" Baxter smirked, mistaking Samuel's composure for weakness. He leaned in, his voice lowering. "The problem is people like you thinking you can just walk around here like you belong." Samuel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Years of experience had taught him the futility of arguing in situations like this. But the anger simmered just below the surface. Baxter, seeing no immediate reaction, continued, "That jacket of yours." Baxter sneered, gesturing to the worn military jacket. "Where'd you get it? The thrift store?" Samuel's voice remained steady. "I earned this jacket." Baxter scoffed, his smirk widening. "Sure you did. Maybe you handed out water to the real soldiers, or cleaned up after them. That's about all someone like you could do." The crowd that had begun to gather murmured uneasily. Phones were raised, quietly recording. The weight of Baxter's words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the prejudice Samuel had faced all his life. "You think you're somebody special because of that jacket?" Baxter pressed. "You think it gives you the right to walk around here like you're important?" Samuel's grip on his cane tightened further. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I served my country," he said. "That's all you need to know." Baxter's smirk faltered. For a moment, the balance of power seemed to shift. Samuel's quiet dignity held a strength that Baxter couldn't understand. But the young officer, determined to reassert control, reached out and grabbed Samuel's arm. The crowd gasped, their murmurs growing louder. A young man stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "Let him go. He hasn't done anything wrong." Another voice joined in, then another. "Show him some respect. He's a veteran." Baxter's face darkened as he realized the crowd was turning against him. Before he could respond, another patrol car pulled up. Out stepped Sergeant Angela Carter, a middle-aged black woman whose calm but commanding presence silenced the crowd. "Officer Baxter," she said, her voice firm, "step away from Mr. Hart." Baxter hesitated, his grip on Samuel's arm tightening briefly before he let go. Carter's sharp gaze left no room for argument. Turning to Samuel, she asked gently, "Are you all right, sir?" Samuel nodded, his voice steady despite the tension. "I am now." The crowd erupted in cheers and shouts of support. Phones captured every moment as Carter addressed the gathering. "What happened here today was unacceptable," she said, her tone resolute. "We owe Mr. Hart, and everyone in this community, the respect they deserve. Officer Baxter's behavior does not reflect the values of this department, and there will be consequences." As Baxter was escorted away, the crowd's energy shifted from anger to unity. Strangers approached Samuel, offering words of gratitude and support. The community had come together, not just for Samuel, but for what he represented. As Samuel walked home, surrounded by newfound allies, he reflected on the day's events. He had spent a lifetime carrying the weight of prejudice, but today, he had seen the power of standing together. His dignity remained intact, untouchable, and for the first time in a long time, he felt truly seen.